Good evening, everyone. Pastor Craig here. I hope that you are doing fantastic, that you're having a good day, that as you look around your small group, you are seeing people who support you, who you are giving of yourself to support, because remember, that's what our small groups are for. Glad you're where you are tonight, because we have finished a series that answered the three questions. Where did I come from? Why am I here on earth right now? And where am I going? By having those three questions answered, it helps us live with the right now, with a lot more confidence and the ability to endure a lot more things. And we're going to continue on in another series called Famous Nemesis, because all of us have stories or movies or things that we like. I myself love a good movie where there is a hero and there is a villain, or for myself who cheers for the Minnesota Vikings, maybe not as much this year with all this stuff going on with the NFL, but all of you who choose to make fun of and just cast all kinds of persecution against me, you're my nemesis when it comes to the NFL. But we're going to be talking about Famous Nemesis because we need to understand more and get help with how to live in the right now, the why are we here piece. And so the Famous Nemesis is something that we're going to use to compare foolishness and wisdom. Ultimately, that's what we're going to be studying, but using Famous Nemesis in these stories. So the first thing you're going to do, your leader is going to hand out a sheet that is a matching sheet, and it will looks like this, where you're going to have two columns of two different pictures, and when they say to turn the paper over, turn it over, and you're drawing the line from the hero to the villain that belong to the same story, whether it's the Bible or a movie or whatever it is. And one of our 8th grade boys, Max Davis, is responsible for this. So give a shout out to Max. But you're going to do this right now for a prize. And so leaders, you're going to stop the video. And when you're all set, you're going to get everybody to start at the same time. So students, draw your lines. When you're done, hold it up. Your leader will come over and get it from you. And we'll grade it right away. And so stop the video right now and do the Famous Nemesis matching test. Alright, so I hope that you enjoyed doing that. And I'm not sure who the winner is, but leaders, if you would make sure I know who the winners are so that I can recognize leaders. And hopefully you are just enjoying your delicious prize from winning and not being arrogant at all by just rubbing it in people's faces that you actually won something. But as we continue with Famous Nemesis and the spiritual lessons behind it, guys, there is something that wages war within us for control. And when we think about why we're here on earth, to be the image of God, to make sure that what God is for, that's what we're for, that's what we're all about. We need help with that. I don't know about you, but I need help with that. Sometimes I'm very mature. Other times, you can talk to Maart or some of the other leaders. I'm not very mature. I need help. And you need help as well. That's something that the Bible is very, very clear on, and we need to ask for help. So the main passage that we're going to use for this short series is found in James. James 1, 5-8, what says this: If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea, blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. So before I get to the parts that I want to talk about with this, comparing and contrasting what God says wisdom is and what God says being a fool or being foolish is, you're going to take a few minutes right now again to look at this passage yourself. So you're going to have a sheet like this that has the Famous Nemesis logo on it with that passage, James 1, 5-8, written in green. And the instructions are for you to use the margins, use the space on the sides, wherever, to highlight, underline, write out some observations, whatever it might be with this passage. And any questions that you have, use this paper for that. If you need to use the backside, use the backside. But then end with, as the instructions are, on the bottom side of the back sheet, write out what you think God, through the James, is communicating to us. Because understanding this passage is really important as we continue to live in this life, on this earth, and live our life right now, the why we're here piece. And so you're going to stop the video again, you're going to get this handout, and you're going to take the amount of time that your leaders have for you to go through this and engage in studying this short passage. And so go for it. Okay, I hope that that was very interesting and that you got into some good discussion, because there's some pretty deep stuff in there. There can be some things that might seem a little bit confusing as far as the way the words are written to us in English. So I hope that you asked good questions, and if you didn't have all your questions answered but due to time, make sure you hit up your leader, or if your leader needs help, I will help you the best I can to make sure you have answers to all those questions. And we're going to get to it more next week, and maybe even the week after that. We'll see how things go with how far we make progress with all this. And so, but before we get to studying what God says are the characteristics of somebody who is wise, the idea of if any of us lacks wisdom, which is everybody, we need to ask God, and the rest of that passage, I want to make sure we're understanding for sure what wisdom is not. Because the opposite of being wise is being a fool. And I'm not talking about where you do something foolish, once or twice or whatever. I'm talking about somebody who is a fool. That's the characteristic of their life. Everybody knows them to be just so ridiculously simple-minded and arrogant, and they don't listen to anybody at all. We're going to see, what does God mean? And we find these 5 characteristics of a fool from the book of Proverbs. You're going to need the next handout, which is the 5 characteristics of a fool. It kind of has the little funny hat on the one side, and Mr. T. If you know who Mr. T is, and the I pity the fool, if you know what that is, who that is, raise your hand and make my day, make your leader's day, because it is an older TV show, but it's something that's pretty funny. And so the court gesture hat along with that, make sure you have this out as we go through the next little bit. Alright, so the 5 characteristics of a fool. Looking at your sheet there, number 1 is what we call the simple. The simple, S-I-M-P-L-E. And what that's talking about is somebody who is easily persuaded. They lack, good judgment, the kind of thing where everybody else knows that this is the right or best thing to do, and the person who is simple just doesn't get it. Somebody who is very gullible or very naive. And again, I'm not talking about this being where something happens where occasionally you make a mistake, or occasionally somebody tricks you, or somebody calls you gullible, whatever it is. I'm not talking about where that happens occasionally. I'm talking about where this is something that is a characteristic of who this kind of a person is. And so as we go through these 5 things, make sure that you're doing a good self-evaluation, that as people, our relationship with you, your parents, relatives, your small group leader, and friends, if they're saying these things about you, you need to pay attention to that, because there could be characteristics of a fool that are going on inside of you. However, even if that's true, the best part that we're going to get to is based on James 1, where if we lack wisdom, we can ask God. But before we get there, we're going to go through these. So the verse that goes along with being simple is Proverbs 14:15. The simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps. And so that's the first characteristic, somebody who is considered simple. Number 2 is foolish. It's the word foolish that the Bible uses to characterize a fool. And by foolish, we're talking about somebody who does not listen to the guidance of others. They don't want to be told how to live their life at all. They think their way is the best way all the time, and every time. They repeat their foolishness because they don't learn from their mistakes. That's what we're talking about. That's what God is telling us is the characteristic of a fool, to be simple. But then you take it a step further to the point of, I don't want anybody telling me what to do ever. I know what's best for me. I'm not going to learn because nobody else knows anything that's going to help me. And so that's the characteristic of being foolish, and that's Proverbs 12:15. The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice. So that's number 2, foolish. Number 3 is what we call the mocker. And I don't know about you, but I have been mocked before, and unfortunately I have mocked others before in my life, and that is not a good thing. To be on the receiving end is no fun. To be on the giving end of that is also very horrible, and ultimately is not a whole lot of fun. But the idea behind mocker is to make fun of or to tear somebody down because that you see them living a different way that you're not choosing to go. Therefore, you're going to make fun of them and make sure you're drawing attention to what you think their stupidity is, even if they're not heading in a bad direction. That's a characteristic of a fool, to be one who is a mocker. And again, it's not somebody, if you have ever mocked somebody, that doesn't mean that God says you are a fool. What we're saying is that is the characteristic of somebody who is living foolishly, and if you continue to live that way and don't learn from it, then you are a fool. And so we can learn, and again, the best part is that it's coming, which we get to ask God. So Proverbs 21:24 says this, the proud and arrogant person, mocker is his name, behaves with insolent fury. And that word insolent that we have here in English, where it talks about where they are insulting people all the time. There is an arrogance and just a prideful haughtiness to insulting and making fun of other people, and it's incredibly disrespectful. And so the proud and arrogant person who is named mocker, they are arrogant and disrespectful and make fun of people constantly. That's the characteristic of what a mocker is. Number 4, we're talking about the adulteress or the tempter. And what that is talking about is to where you are luring away. And Proverbs is full of advice that Solomon was giving to his sons, saying that, you know what, a wayward woman, somebody who's beautiful but not following God, is going to throw themselves at you, and they're going to try and lure you away from what is good. So the adulteress or the tempter is the word, and even though that's associated with being female, it's not a female thing. It is anybody who is trying to get you to be lured away from what is good and what is right. It's taking mocker farther to where you're trying to, just like when you go fishing, you're trying to use the sweetest looking, big fat juicy worm, the lure, whatever it is, and you're trying to get them to come on over so that you can catch them and fry them up, and it is so delicious. Hey, we need to have a fish fry that could be one of the prizes. It also means to entice away from what is right and good and safe to what destroys. That's what an adulteress, that's what a tempter does. That's another characteristic of a fool. If you look at Proverbs 5:3-6, it says this, for the lips of an adulteress drip honey, and smoother than oil is her speech. But in the end, she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. And so that's pretty self-explanatory of something that seems good, seems right, but it's really trying to trap somebody into ruining their life. And so that is another characteristic of a fool, where you are the one who is tempting other people to walk away from what is right and what is wise and just trap them in something that is miserable, because a person who is an adulteress and a tempter, they are a miserable person. There's just no question about that. Number 5, the last one then, is talking about the idea of being a sluggard. The worst characteristic of a fool is called a sluggard, where that is a lazy person who doesn't want to do any work for anything, but wants the benefit of the work from other people. And they don't heed any warnings. They have every opportunity to change their ways, to work, to make something of themselves. And the Bible through Proverbs and other places describes the sluggard as somebody who is just irritating all the time. Because usually they're super critical of other people who are working, who are doing their best, and a sluggard is never doing anything and wants to reap the benefit, though, from other people. So when it's potluck dinner time, woo, here I am with my fork and spoon, even though I didn't provide anything at all. Or when it comes time to work on my spiritual life, why would I want to do that? I'm going to make fun of other people. But when there is spiritual success, well, I want to make sure that I'm around that. That is the idea of being a sluggard. That is a horrible characteristic for anybody to be called. 2 verses on this, Proverbs 21:25. The desire of the sluggard puts him to death, for his hands refuse to work. And Proverbs 10:26. Like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes. So is the lazy one to those who send him. So vinegar rots teeth. The acid in there is something that just clearly rots your teeth. Just like, and it's very irritating, but it's irreversible rot that can't be fixed when it comes to your teeth. Just like if you've ever been around a campfire, maybe you're around a campfire right now listening to this, and you get smoke in your eyes, you're just like, you want relief because it's so irritating, and you move away from it. So that's what it's talking about. And so guys, when you think about being a characteristic of a fool, if you are seeing these in your life, you need to pay attention. You need to ask for help, and that's what we're going to get to ultimately. I hope that as we've gone through these characteristics of a fool, that you've seen a progression of things starting simple, and it's like they don't even really know that they're being characterized as a fool yet, and then it just progresses down to the idea of being a sluggard. So the next thing that I want you to do is to stop the video, and leaders, as we've gone through this sheet, make sure they have all the answers you filled into the blanks. But I want you to discuss, what are you noticing about the farther we go down, 1 through 5, what's happening to a person who is acting in these ways, which are characteristics of a fool? What kind of progression do you see? So go ahead and do this right now, and then I'll be back to wrap things up. All right, so we are finishing with lesson number 1 on famous nemesis. And I hope that as you discuss, that you're starting to see that there is a big difference between somebody who is acting foolishly to somebody who is a fool, and how much help we need right now. To answer that question, why are we here? We need to have confidence in why we're living, and that's why we need wisdom that comes from God, not coming from ourselves or no other place, because that is ultimately going to lead to the foolishness that's going to characterize you as a fool by the end. And so that's what we have for tonight. We're going to continue on next week. But guys, I love you and I care for you. I know that your leaders do. That's why they're right next to you right now. I hope that you have a great week, and we'll see you next week.